Yeah, I see. Okay, so I think we'll be starting right now. So thank you everybody for coming. Today at this weekly event, we have Tom White, who had recently, if you have tuned in, received a grad scheme offer from NatWest Group. He worked in the structured finance for about 8 weeks, and he had this good grad scheme offer. Like I said, he had also received a Barclays Spring Week, I believe 2 years ago, and couldn't complete because of the pandemic at that time. But yeah, so Tom will be leading the presentation today, speaking more about experience with cover letters and reflecting on what are the best ways to make a cover letter stand out and get you hopefully the best stuff as possible. So Tom, you can now take the lead of this.
Yeah, lovely. I'll give you a quick introduction to myself first. So I've done nigh on 100 cover letters, 100 applications, spring weeks, internships. As we were saying, I've received offers from Barclays for a spring week, NatWest for an internship, which has since been turned into a grad role, which is quite handy to finish uni with. Today I'm going to go through cover letters and just where they are, how to approach them, and kind of how you can think about them in the process of applications generally. So just to have that final introduction, I'm Tom White, incoming 2022 NatWest Group structured finance analyst. So what I'm going to say in terms of our first point we're going to go through is, where do cover letters fit in the application process? You've got, initially, you will give in a CV and a cover letter. You'll then usually do a psychometric test or some recorded videos before going to an assessment center and then finding out if you get the role. Now, I'm sure you know with psychometric tests, it's a tick box. If you get them right, if you pass their standards, then they'll look at your CV and cover letter. If you don't, then you're out. It's pretty similar with the CV and the cover letter. If they are rubbish, then you're out. You aren't gonna get into a financial institution with a great cover letter. That's not gonna make your application. It's just a tick box along the way. So what you're really trying to do is just make sure that you haven't really messed up, because that's where loads of people get eliminated. So first thing I'm gonna actually talk about in terms of cover letter is kind of the structure we're looking at. We've got a one page cover letter. Do any more, they're going to get bored. They're not going to read it. Do any less, they're going to think you've put no effort in. In terms of formatting, you really don't want to be doing anything to it. Just leave it as the standard Word stuff. If you format it, you're going to be wasting your time, and the chances are you might do something that you think looks great, but they're going to think this looks rubbish, and then suddenly cover letter's gone, you're out. So just leave it as it is, like standard. There's nothing wrong with the standard Word template. Now, you're going to have a top right hand corner, you want the date, then you'll want to address it. So, dear sir, ma'am, to whomever it may concern. Great if you can address it to someone. If not, then it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be expected to. Finish it off with yours faithfully, your name, yours faithfully, Tom White. Now, in terms of content, you want an introduction paragraph. Who are you? What are you doing? Then you want why the company. Then you want why the role. And then you want why you. Now, I'm first going to talk about that introduction paragraph. The odds are everybody that's applying is going to be applying as an econ graduate or an econ degree student, for instance, finance degree student. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just say that, because if you are some random student, the odds are everybody is going to be that. How many people are going to read, I'm studying econ at UCL, Warwick, anywhere? That's just a standard thing. If you can find something that makes you a little bit unique in that first introduction, that's a bonus point. I did a semester in Denmark, so I usually mention that. So I'm not just your standard degree student. I've also been abroad and tried something new, and that helps with my perspective. So let's just have a little bit of uniqueness and just give some context to yourself. Now, next thing we're going to look at is why the company. The company is an interesting one to look at. This is where you're showing that you've researched and you're showing your own analytical skills. Anybody can say, why JP Morgan? Because they're a big bank. Great. Everybody can say that. What you want to do is you want to find some news. You want to find something that they've done recently, and you want to be able to talk about it and show your knowledge of the wider market. So I've actually got a website on this, which I'll mention a little bit more in a moment, because this is something that's going to take the most time in your cover letters. You've got to find a positive story, you've got to spin it, and you've got to analyze it. So one example that I'm going to use, these are just throwing names out there because I don't quite remember the details on it, is Shell acquired Ubitricity. Ubitricity is like an electrical charging company. Now, if, for instance, JP Morgan were involved with this, you could say, okay, I'm interested in working in JP Morgan because they helped Shell acquire Ubitricity. Brilliant. That's more detail than most people will give, but it's still pretty useless. What you need to do is say why that's relevant and why that's useful to you. So Ubitricity, electric charging company, figure something out, like we know that electric vehicles are going to not be sold in the UK again from, I think it's 2030. So you can say, I'm interested in working with JP Morgan because they're looking to the future by working with a company such as Shell, who are going into a market trying to make sure they're still relevant. Now, by doing this, you're showing that you're forward thinking, you're showing you know the market, and you're showing that you know what JP Morgan are interested in. JP Morgan aren't just going with Shell because it's a money deal. Obviously it plays a part. They need to earn their fees. But if they have a relationship with a company like this, they're going to be doing it so they can have future deals. If Shell stayed with fossil fuels, they'd no longer be relevant in 20 years. But because they're moving forward, JP Morgan are happy to deal with them. So that's a contributing factor. You've just got to kind of use your own analysis and context and just detail. Make sure you show your knowledge. Now, that's where my website in particular comes in, Finance Infiltrate. I'm sure there'll be links around. But essentially on there, we've just got a resource bank of articles. So that Ubitricity article is on there. It's just saying positive story, the firm's involved, a little bit of analysis. And that's just to kind of reduce the amount of time you have to spend researching. Just an idea in terms of other researching, because what I'd usually do before I started this website was I'd go through their Twitter, I'd go through their news feed, go on the Financial Times. These are always, you've just got to find the right story and the right kind of spin to put on it. Now, the next section we're going to look at is why the role. The role, it's what you're going to do, but you're also not going to know a lot about it. You're a first year, you're a second year. You've never actually worked in an investment bank before. You've never worked in a financial institution before. So what they won't expect is detailed inside information. Like they won't expect you to know the ins and outs of the job. What they will expect is for you to go on the website and to find out what they want. So I remember when I applied for NatWest, I looked at structured finance and I saw, as part of structured finance, they have leveraged finance. Okay, great. So I've read something off the website. This is what they do. I'm going to put that in a cover letter. Still useless because you've read the website, but you haven't given any context to it. Why does leveraged finance as part of structured finance interest me? You've got to show your own interest. So for me,
نعم.
Sorry.
So for me, that was leverage finance, you're looking at companies. I'm interested in entrepreneurialism. So I can look and say, if we're doing leverage finance, we get to understand the company, to understand lots of companies, how they're going to grow. And you can look at it holistically and you can get kind of experience in these different roles. So it's about, again, it's looking at companies, you're doing your research, and then you're showing your own understanding. There's no point just taking stuff off the website. It's all about kind of showing how this is what you want. Okay. Next point, final main point on cover letters is why you. This is the only point that's transferable between companies. It's only transferable between companies to an extent. I'll go into that a bit later. But as a basis for doing this, you have to look at their website. You have to look at the job role. There are going to be clues. There are going to be details. There are going to be tips. They're going to say, we want somebody who's not interested in. We want somebody who's a good communicator, a good team worker. They're going to say these things. They're the basic tips. So obviously then you want to use the STAR format. I'm sure you all heard. So you want figures, you want it to be quantitative, situation, task, action, response. That's your basis. What you can do to make it even better is you can go onto the company's website. You can go and look at their core purpose, their core values. You could say, looking at a bank that has a purpose of putting their customers first. If they put their customers first, you can kind of imply what they want. They want people who are trustworthy, who take positions of responsibility. And then you can use your examples to show that. So you can align it with their purpose, for instance. And then some banks, they have their own core values that they want for their employees. And you can go through their websites and you can find these and you can put them in this section. So it's about doing that extra bit of research and just showing that. Now, just a minute ago, I mentioned that this is slightly transferable. What you can do to save some time here is you can go off on your own without any guidance for cover letters or jobs or anything. You can write down a list of words. You can say responsible, resilient, leader. You can say all of these and you can put 3 different examples down next to each. Now, if you do this, you have a bank of examples that you've got that you can just kind of reword, refocus depending upon each cover letter. So if you, for instance, have responsibility as your word, and a bank says, we want people who really try and take things on, be proactive. You can then look at your little responsibility sentence, your couple of sentences, and you can see if you can spin it. And that will take maybe 5-10 minutes compared to 20 minutes thinking and constructing a whole new answer. But it's very important that you actually kind of tailor it. If you keep it the same for each cover letter, it's not going to align to the specific company. You want each cover letter to be new. You want it to be individual, and you want to show that you've understood the company's values, their purposes, and what they want from you. Okay, have we got any further slides? Just trying to recall. Yeah, I've already covered this a bit. Obviously, I don't know too much about Clio, but they've obviously got some resources as well. And I think that's a bit more around the general building. I mentioned the application process earlier. All of these initial stages, your CVs, your cover letters, your psychometric tests, and your higher view automated interviews, they're kind of more tick boxes than anything else. You're essentially trying not to get thrown out in the first stages. It's when you hit the assessment centers, that's when you're going to be breaking into these firms, because that's when they can compare you to other people. As it is, your psychometric test narrows it down. Loads of people are going to get failed on that. Loads of people are going to have rubbish CVs, rubbish format. They're not going to put effort into the cover letters. They get binned. And then the higher view interviews, again, if you do poorly on them, binned. That leaves you finally, with a smaller pool, and I'm going to take NatWest, for example, I think they had over 20,000 applications for all of the internship positions, and there were 160 odd people that got hired. So look at those figures. How many of those are going to get failed because they failed psychometric tests? Thousands. How many are going to get binned because they had a rubbish CV or they didn't put effort into the cover letter? Probably another couple of thousand. And then finally you go down into these assessment centers. That's the final stage, and that's where you're able to show yourself as a standout. Cover letters are important, but at the end of the day, they are also a tick box. But it's a very important tick box, because if you don't tick it, you're out. Okay, I think that might be the end of it. But of course, I am here for Q&A. Any questions? Anything else I can talk to you about NatWest or Liverpool or whatever else? Feel free to just shout out and have a go.
I mean, I think I have a question about maybe, I mean, you could obviously speak out or send a message in a chat. But for me, like coming from, let's say, a non-target uni, how do you think is the best way to actually convert? What did you actually do? Because it's obviously very competitive, and even if you're in a target uni, there's a really good chance not going to get in. So how did that come in from like a completely non-target uni, like Liverpool?
Okay, so I think what I've done personally is I've just gone through and I've taken opportunities. You don't have to be somebody who starts societies, for instance. I'm vice president at Liverpool Entrepreneurs Society. I've been to Denmark on a semester abroad. These things is kind of about just getting involved. You're not doing these necessarily for, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Anything that you do, you're doing so that you have these skills that you can apply. You can put them into these word boxes. I mentioned in the YU role, everything you do, you'll see words associated with it. You go out, you organize a football team. That's something that's on my cover letters. Like I've been out and I've organized an 11-a-side team every week, and that's taking responsibility, being proactive. It's just about showing yourself as somebody who goes and takes that responsibility. Any role you do, you can apply keywords with. It's just about having those examples and applying them. They don't have to be massively strong. You've just got to have actionable points and then results. The thing they absolutely love is figures. If you can show you've made a difference, then that's the easiest thing.
Mm.
I think one more point on that coming from Liverpool. It's not a target uni, but everything's about volume. As I said, I applied to over 100 of these. I got lucky getting NatWest, getting Barclays. They were the only ones I ended up hearing from. And that's it. Once you're in, you're in. But it will take a while. Sometimes things won't go right, but it's just about keep doing it.
Yeah, I see. Completely agree. Okay, so I have a question from Gonzalo. You can speak out, please.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for your time today. Just in terms of the layout that you mentioned and what we should include in the cover letter, do you recommend that each of the points you mentioned, whether it be the introduction, why the company, why the role, and why you, should those be individual paragraphs?
Yeah. So I think you've got to look at it from somebody who's reading these, their perspective. If you've got a massive block of text, are you going to want to read that? Personally, I'd absolutely hate to read that. Like, big chunk of text. It's probably going to be similar. There are going to be similar respects everywhere. Somebody's going to have the same idea as you with respect to why the company, for instance. You want something easy to read. You want something that's unique. The first thing is having paragraphs at least separates it up. You're not going to be trying to differentiate each individual sentence. So yeah, definitely have paragraphs. One paragraph for each is fine. It's just making sure it's easy to read and something that's not going to put off the person reading it, because they can just be brutal. Like you can just get removed.
Okay, great. And just in terms of the why you paragraph, you mentioned that we should try to include, some figures if you can. Is that in terms of sort of, for example, if we are involved in a student society, should we try to include different events we've organized? Is that what you mean, or is it more on the firm side?
So again, it depends what point you're making. If for instance you're involved in a society, then and you've been involved in an event, great. If you can show figures in that, maybe you've organized an event and it's had 20 people, you can say, okay, so I'm a proactive person. I get things done. I'm organizing them. So you've said your situation, said your task, you're organizing it. Your action was marketing. You've made sure it's gone out through various forms of social media. So you've done it holistically. And then your result is great. I've had 20, 30 people show up, and this is a record for my society. Obviously, if there isn't a figure that's appropriate, so if there's something that's not quantifiable, you don't have to put a figure in, but it's all about being easy to read. If somebody is reading yours and they see figures, they're going to think, great, I can see they've done this. If they say, oh, this person's organizing an event, okay, they've organized an event, it could be pretty rubbish, but they just don't know. If you've got figures, you're just backing up what you're saying. You're showing that you've done something well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so we have Owen, you can go ahead. We're going to be doing chemistry.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wondering, so if you meet a person, right, in this firm, should you see the name in the cover letter or?
Yeah, I mean, if you chat to someone beforehand, you can name drop them. I think it's always important to kind of make sure they're okay with that. I think you can do it without making sure they're okay with it, but it's a little questionable. But if you're going to say you've talked to somebody, is that going to make as much of an impact? You've got to make sure that it's worthwhile. So I've talked to Alan, some guy called Alan, about your firm, JP Morgan. I've talked to Alan about JP Morgan, and he seems like a really nice guy. That's not going to be of any use. If you get something specific, like Alan says, every Friday morning, there are meetings that you do which give you exposure at JP Morgan. If you say that, if you say, okay, so there's a meeting every Friday morning from talking to Alan, great. Now you develop it a little bit more. You say, these Friday mornings, they really stand out to me because I want to develop my presentation skills. And it sounds like JP Morgan is great to do that from my chat with Alan. It's just about developing those points. So if you're going to name drop someone, great. Just make it mean something.
Sure, thank you so much.
Okay, so now we have also a question from Joyce. Could you go over how you would link the company's news with how that relates to you?
Yeah, I'm just going to read that in the chat quickly, just to make sure I've got the full extent of it. How would you link the company's news with how it relates to you? Okay, yeah, cool. So it's about it's about developing analysis. You're not necessarily relating it to you. You're relating it to your own values, for instance. So my example is electricity and Shell. So I'll try and think of something else. You could say, again, I'm just using examples of Finance Infiltrated, my website. So another thing that happened was, I think it was, don't remember the company. Some investment manager acquired Park Airline. So they acquired that during the heights of COVID. So if they've done that, you can talk about why have they done that. So for instance, it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be cheaper, and they obviously must have the confidence that the airline sector is going to bounce back. So what can you link with that? So they've looked forward, they're forward thinking, they're opportunistic, and they're seeking out opportunities proactively. Now you can say, great, okay, so this firm is obviously proactive. It's thinking forward. You can say, this matches my own personal ambition because I think it's really important that we look in different places. We don't just go mainstream. I want to be somewhere where we have room for enterprise, innovation. It's just about kind of having that news, analyzing it, and then seeing if you can link it to those keywords and if you align with those keywords.
Yeah, okay. Another one we have, I believe, if you had never had an experience in finance, how would you go about understanding the roles or divisions? Leverage finance, equity research, global markets.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's what I was alluding to earlier. They don't expect you to know every role inside out. So when I applied to NatWest, leverage finance is kind of buzzwords. Leverage just means, okay, so you're doing it with more money than the company's worth. Finance is, yeah, so you're essentially just doing acquisitions. So I Googled that. I thought leverage finance, that sounds like it's acquisitions, but I Googled it. Once you Google it, then you can try and apply it. You can just apply it to your interests, and I think that's the main thing. You don't have to have a finance background. Like, I mean, even if I didn't have a finance background, it's fairly simple to kind of just Google these terms and then relate them to what you're interested in. It's got to come from you though. You can't say these buzzwords and have no substance behind it. You've got to think about what you enjoy. Do you enjoy the innovation of businesses? Do you enjoy looking at the analytical side? If that's part of it, so you've got a data analysis role, you could say, I've been in university, I've done analytics modules, and that's something that's really appealed to me because I can go through things in a we're not going to say that word, going through them in an order that is thorough and iterated multiple times. You draw on your own experiences and what you like, and if you can see that's within the role, then that's how you're going to link it. So, I mean, you can Google these roles, but it doesn't matter if you have like an inside out knowledge. Nobody has inside out knowledge unless you work there.
Okay, so would you advise us to research the recruiter's name on LinkedIn to address them as such on cover letters?
I think LinkedIn is a very valuable resource. So it's certainly worth getting in touch with people on LinkedIn. I mean, I know when I was doing the applications for NatWest, I reached out to a few people at the firm. I asked them about why they like the company and that kind of thing. That is good to an extent, but I've mentioned other points. If you can fill out your cover letter with other things that you think are stronger, that's great. I think talking to people in the firm is great because you get your name known. Maybe that will be of use. But if you can find stronger points elsewhere, that's also great. Because when you talk to somebody at the firm, they can't tell you that much, whether it's due to inside information or whether they don't want to or they don't know, because these are vague areas. Could I tell you what I do every single day at NatWest? I have no idea, because some of that is perhaps classified. So you're not going to get massive amounts out of people talking to people on LinkedIn. But in terms of application process, I know I did it before my assessment center. I asked people, what kind of things come up in the assessment center? Did you do anything to prepare? Is there anything you'd recommend? I'd say that's more valuable in the later stages than perhaps the cover letters.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe that's it for the questions, unless someone has anything to say. But Tom, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, so thanks for your time. It was a very interesting event. And if there's any other question or... Okay, so I think there isn't any other question. Okay, Tom, thank you so much for your time. You can check his website, Finance Infiltrated. I think it's a really, I'm not saying it's because it's his, but it's really good because it really gives the reports like the Viva partners. Especially for like cover letters on this session, you can always find basically a shortcut to just basically, if you're lazy, to just release something because it's quite insightful. But yeah, thank you so much, Tom.
I think I'm just gonna say one last thing as well.
Yeah.
If you're ever trying to think about shortcutting by buying things, there's no point, because I've seen people offer like management kind of career advice for money. When you've got websites like Clio, websites like Finance Infiltrated, anything you think you can do for payment, you can also do for free. Like this is a good initiative here.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be loads of advice. It's not going to be like perfect all the time, but as you go, you'll learn things anyway. And I think that's much better than ever trying to pay for something that may not be right anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's it for today. I think we should have a weekly event also next week, and we'll be sending out like basically a PDF resource with I think about 10 cover letters to give you a better idea. But that's it for today. Thank you for coming, and thank you again, Tom, and goodbye. Have a great day.
Cheers, Amen. Have a good one.
So.